My guest today is a legend. He's worked with the biggest names in show business, from Groucho Marx to Blondie, and he still manages Alice Cooper. He's also a highly successful movie producer and created the phenomenon of the celebrity chef. I am talking today with Shep Gordon.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, where to begin? You're a man with many hats. Maybe we could begin about how we first met, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I ended up going to a party that you were at for New Year's, and I actually was in Hana. I don't know if you knew this. I was in Hana to write, and I was set there for 2 weeks by myself, and I came across this guy who put birds all over my body.
The Birdman.
The Birdman. And he invited me to this party, and he said, you got to come. It's like the biggest party on the island. And so I hitchhiked a ride, and I came, and I met you. And thank you so much. I had such a wonderful time that night. And then not only did I get to spend time with you that night, I actually got to come and spend time with you at your house. So thank you for opening your doors to me.
Nice.
One of the most special things I'll remember about those few days that we spent was I slept in a room that was blessed by the Dalai Lama. Now, can you tell me a little bit about how you met the Dalai Lama?
Yeah, I wouldn't say blessed by the Dalai Lama, but influenced by.
Influenced by.
You slept on a bed that he had slept on in New York. My journey with him was started in LA. I was living with an actress who invited me to go see him in a speech at UCLA, I think it was. And because she was well known and fame lets you in the back door to everything, she was invited for to meet His Holiness after the speech, and she took me with him. And when he walked in the room, I felt like I had just taken the greatest shower of my life. Just this journey to innocence instantaneously was amazing, and just, hello, hello, one of millions that he met. And I got back to Hawaii, and I noticed in a bookstore, in those days there were still bookstores, there was a poster up that said he was coming to the Big Island for a teaching. And at that time in my life, I had become involved with the culinary arts, so I got a hold of the representative of His Holiness and asked if I could feed him when he was in Hawaii, that I would love to do an offering of feeding him, which they accepted very generously. And but they accepted on the one term, which was no expectation of ever meeting him. That if you have any expectations at all, you shouldn't do it. So I put that in my brain very heavily. And the first morning, his first meal, he eats a very big breakfast, which I thought would be vegetarian, and found out about a week before he came, no vegetables at all, just meat.
Really?
Yeah, just meat, like beef stew and spaghetti and meatballs at 5 in the morning. And,
oh my gosh.
They came to me and asked me to bring him his breakfast. And I was like, I thought you said I'd never meet him. And I came in, he was brushing his teeth and laughing and giggling, and he's giggled ever since. So I got lucky enough to travel with him to Trinidad. I traveled to South America, and I was his cook. I made him, he eats a very big breakfast, a light lunch, and nothing after sunset, just some broth. When I got to New York, someone came to the event who knew who I was, and that I wasn't a cook, and that I had talents that maybe would be more helpful to the Tibetan community. So I ended up joining his board. Because of that, I promote a lot of his stuff. And because of that, I was able, after he slept on the bed at the Mark Hotel, to take the bed.
Oh my goodness.
Which you slept on.
Which I slept on. That's incredible. Wow. So I feel it was blessed, because I felt so much good energy, positive energy when I was there. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that story. May I ask you, so spending time with you, we took walks on the beach, which were really beautiful. And the thing that I really love about you, Shep, is, being as known as you are in the industry and working with the people that you have, and creating an innovator in so many ways, you're so humble and you're so down to earth and open. How did you maintain this, and how do you maintain this? Do you have a spiritual practice that you like to do?
No. Not really at all.
Yeah.
I sort of wake up, do what I do, and go to sleep. And I feel really lucky that what I like to do is serve people. And along the way, just understood that how selfish and how beautiful it is that, you know, that's the way you really get happy, is by service. So I never really had, I never meditated. I'm not a Buddhist. I've never really done a spiritual practice. I just sort of lived my life. And when I came across Buddhism, I realized that I was living my life in a very Buddhist way, but not because I practiced Buddhism. It just came natural.
Yeah.
So I just sort of wake up and do what I do, and try not to hurt anybody. And, you know.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be hurting anybody. Can I
a few chickens.
A few chickens. You eat eggs?
I eat eggs,
Okay.
yeah. Well, Alice is very famous for killing a chicken on stage, and I threw the chicken on stage.
Oh my goodness, can you tell us that story? Because that's right, that's one of the biggest things that you did for Alice to get him known, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it's pretty,
Oh my
it's an
goodness.
interesting thing to be known for, killing a chicken. But as Alice says, why doesn't anybody bother Colonel Sanders? Because he gets so much grief for killing this one chicken.
the chicken.
Yeah. With Alice, we just, you know, I've spent most of my life as a manager, which you can't really train for, but the idea is to get attention for some artist. An artist needs to have an audience if he's going to have a voice, and you need to get attention.
Yeah.
And
he wasn't that known, was he, at the time?
No, he was starting
first...
to get known, but he was known enough that we could have a platform, and I was very lucky. I got asked to work with John Lennon on his only solo concert.
John Lennon? You worked with John Lennon?
So
wow.
I got Alice to go on before John Lennon, so I knew that that would be a moment of attention, so I decided we had to do something really outrageous that defined who his audience was, and his audience was children who were rebelling against their parents and against society. It was based on rebellion, angst and rebellion.
School's out for summer.
So I didn't know the chicken that couldn't fly. I thought a chicken could fly, so did Alice. So I threw a chicken on stage, and he threw it out to the audience. It could fly.
Oh my goodness.
It had a rough ending, that chicken.
So you've recently been the subject of a documentary called Supermensch, which is all about Shep Gordon. Has this changed your life, being in front of the camera as opposed to being behind?
Yeah, I'd say it's changed my life in very insignificant ways. I've had to spend a lot of time away from home promoting it. I have had a few revelations, and one of the points that I make in the film is that I open the film, and my first line in the film is that my job is to make you famous, and I will probably kill you. And I have many clients who are deceased and died from fame, and everyone in my circle died from fame.
Oh, goodness.
Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Teddy Pendergrass, Luther Vandross. And so fame has always been something that, you know, it's like, it's the stove you don't touch. So I've been very happy to be behind the scenes. And Mike Myers, who directed it, the comedian, was asking me to do this for 10 or 12 years, and I always said no, and then I ended up in the hospital with some life-threatening stuff, very medicated, and he called me in the hospital and said, now?
Oh, really?
And I said, yes. So I've gotten, it's a documentary, so I'll never feel the fame that real fame is, which I'm happy about, but I've gotten touches of it, and it's difficult. It's even more difficult than I imagined on the outside, getting through life with fame. I had one little moment that maybe shed a little light on what I'm trying to say. I'm in my 60s. I've always lived my life. You know, if I'm at a hotel and I have a lunch at 1 o'clock, and I'll walk to the lunch and I'll be thinking in my brain about maybe some music I want to hear, or what I want to have for dinner, or isn't it a beautiful day, or what a beautiful woman, but I'm on my journey and I'm walking to my place. And nobody ever would stop me. I mean, occasionally you'd run into somebody you know, but that's so random. So you can live your life, you live your journey, you live your thing. After the movie screened the first time in New York, I was going to an interview at the Huffington Post, and I heard this voice, because I was walking the way I walk, and I was in my head, and I don't know what I was thinking. Whatever I was thinking, it was my journey.
Yeah.
And I heard this voice, Mr. Gordon, Mr. Gordon, and it sort of came out of my thing. And it was this really lovely, middle-aged Afro-American lady. She said, "Do you mind if I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Sure." Yeah. And she said, "I work at CNN. We screened your movie yesterday. And I, like you, had a very tough mother who's been a shadow in my life. And how did you get through that and become successful?" And it really touched me. It was, here was someone really in need, really reaching out in a real way. But I had an interview in 5 minutes that I had to get to, and I couldn't deal with her. I gave her my card, and I said, "Please, I have to go. I'm really sorry. I have to go to this thing." I know she didn't believe me when I said it. And that night I was at Tribeca Film Festival, and Michael Douglas was questioning me. And he said, "You look a little, something bothering you?" I said, "Yeah, I had this really weird thing today that I can't really put together." And I said, "So let me ask you the question instead of you asking me." I said, "I've spent my whole life putting my arm up or hiring someone to put their arm up to stop guys like you from getting bothered by the public."
Right.
What I never realized is I know that it pisses the public off. And I know what their emotion is. But I never really thought about, how does it feel to you, Michael, when you get ushered past someone in a wheelchair with a piece of paper and a pen, holding it up, and you can't stop? What's the price you pay for that? And he said, it's a big price. You become numb to it after a while. He said, but in the beginning, it haunted me. And it's really, so even my little tiny touch of fame added to my my feelings, which are that fame is, there's nothing about it that's good.
Wow.
But if you're an artist and you need to talk to an audience, the only way to get a broader audience is through fame. So Mike Myers hit it right on the head. He calls it the toxic waste of celebrity is fame. It's just like if you coal mine, people need coal, but there's bad consequences. The toxic waste of celebrity is fame. And very tough to deal with. It's really hard for most people, I think, to get it through their system and stay pure. So I don't know where that takes you, but that's my observation on it anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess my question for you would be, how did you get into the industry? I mean, was it something that you set out to do? No,
not at all. I went to California as a probation officer. I graduated as a social science from the University of Buffalo. And all you could really do was be a social worker or a probation officer. And I chose to be a probation officer. My image of myself was a guy on a white horse, this liberal Jew on a white horse saving the world.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd go, it was Reagan era. I thought I'd go to a jail and help the kids out, have somebody rational, who could really help them. And it was a horrible experience. Lasted one day. And I checked into a motel. I took some psychedelics, which is sort of what we all did in those days. And heard someone screaming down at the pool, a loud voice at the pool, woman's voice. And I had just come from a jail, and I thought of somehow rape came into my brain. So I ran down to the pool. I was pretty high. And I separated them, and she punched me because they were making love.
She punched you?
Yeah, cut my lip.
Oh, no.
And in the morning, I went down to the pool with Janis Joplin. And she was sitting with Jimi Hendrix. And I started dealing to everybody at the hotel, Morris, and every rock star you ever heard of was there. And one day Jimi Hendrix said to me, you can't deal your whole life. What are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, you Jewish? And I said, yeah. He said, you should be a manager. And he introduced me to Alice.
Oh my goodness, wow.
And that sort of started my journey.
And that's how you got your first gig, or you got them a gig?
And then we started, then the journey began, and a lot of hard work and a lot of luck later.
That's incredible.
So I got everything in my life I never really planned. It just sort of I bump into it and say yes.
I was going to ask you, do you feel that there is something beyond what we think we create in our life, like things that are destined to happen or fated that we meet, or is it just...
You know, I don't have any answers to the big questions. I just, you know, from my journey through life, what I've seen is that people who serve other people get happy. Why they do, I don't know. Is it a higher being that comes through them? I mean, some people say that, I don't know. Is it, I have no idea, but I clinically can observe that the people who serve are happy. I'm actually, Anthony Bourdain has commissioned me to do a book, and he wants me to try and see what fame will do to the chefs. Will it have the same consequences?
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is really interesting, and I think, I'm not finished with it yet, but my thought is that they won't suffer as bad because their goal is service, not accolade. An artist's goal is a false god. Yeah. People telling you you're great. A chef's is about service, making you really feel good after your meal, one-on-one. Not 10,000, not 10 million, not, you know, one person who you've made his life better for a moment. And for the most part, I think they're healthier. There's some that have, but
which you're excellent at. You made my life feel better for a moment when I was
I think that's what we're here. You know, that's what I always felt we're sort of here for. The difference between our species and.
And you're a chef, aren't you?
Now I am. Yeah, I've learned.
It's one of the biggest things that brings you joy. Is that right?
That's my passion. That's my meditation, my passion. I think if I have any calling, that's when I feel most comfortable.
Is there anything in this life that you would change in hindsight, looking back? Would you do something differently, or do you think? I would say
nothing and everything.
Nothing and everything. That's a great answer.
I'm pretty happy with the role. You know, it's all I know. Is my journey.
Being a manager, you're in service to your clients all the time now. Has this affected you personally, like to be able to have a personal life in this?
My knee-jerk reaction has always been that I lived other people's lives instead of my own. And that when I retired, I was going to find out what my life was. And I think what I found out was that I wasn't living other people's lives because of the work. I was living other people's lives because something, whatever that something is, which I haven't bothered to explore, it's just who I am. So even when I retired, I was not necessarily living my life. Wow. And it went to other stuff. So I don't know if I'll ever even really discover what my life is, except maybe living other people's lives. Seems to be what I enjoy doing. I don't mean that in a ridiculous way, but
no.
You know, I spend 5 hours a day making reservations for people at restaurants.
You do? Yes, I know.
It's like insane.
Yes.
But I enjoy
being
it.
of service is what you really enjoy.
Yeah,
then.
that's what I enjoy. So
now that you have public profile, do you feel like you would be comfortable being managed?
Yeah, it's.
Can I manage you, Shep?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No, I think that's a great question, because I never really realized if my job was a real job or a manufactured job. It's not like a doctor. You know, someone comes in with a cold, you cure the cold, they're better. What does a manager really do? It's a hard thing to answer, and having now been put on the walkway of a celebrity, having to do press, having to do things, having to trust other people when they tell you what you're walking into, I realize how important managers are, because somebody has to protect you from people who maybe intentions are good but don't have the professionalism to carry through what their intentions are. Sure. So I really, it's really shown me the significance of having a manager, maybe in the most mundane way.
Showed you the value of yourself.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never was sure if an artist really needed a manager, and I never really dealt with the earthly matters, but I always had someone in my office who dealt with the earthly matters. You know, booking the planes, making sure the hotel's right, doing, you know, and I've learned that's really important. And also I see that I now have celebrity which could be monetized, and I can't really do that for myself. But if I had a manager, which I'm at a point in my life where I don't really want to start that journey, but if I was a young guy who had just done this documentary, I would definitely...
You're still a young guy.
Thank you.
In my eyes.
I would look for a manager or an agent. I think they're really... You can't do anything yourself. It's a team game. Everything in life is a team game.
So is it difficult when an artist takes the wrong choice or doesn't take your advice and you can see that they're going to suffer?
I think it really depends on the relationship, for me, and for my personal reflections on that. If the artist was also a friend, then I felt bad. If the artist was a professional relationship, which most of the artists were, my job was to tell them. And once I told them, I felt basically guilt-free. My job was always to tell the truth, really hard truth, and their job wasn't necessarily to listen and do it, but my job was to tell them, and then try and bail them out if they fell on their face.
Can I ask you about your children?
Sure.
Who are beautiful. I met two of them, Amber and
Chase.
Yes, beautiful children. Can you tell me about this experience? Because if I remember correctly, you were in love with their grandmother, and she was the only woman that you were in love with. No,
she was one of a string of relationships, but it lasted a couple of years.
Okay.
And her daughter moved in with us.
Okay.
And her daughter was the first younger person that I really had a relationship with as an adult.
Okay.
She was maybe 11 or 12, and I developed a really great relationship with her. Loved the innocence, loved her. She'd fall asleep in my lap at concerts. We really had a nice time. And then we split up. Her mother and I split up. And they moved back to Jersey, and maybe 15 years went by when we had no communication at all. And I got a message that the daughter had died in a bus crash. And I happened to be in New York, so I wanted to go to the funeral. And because I loved her, you know, and I felt bad that I hadn't kept up the relationship. I really felt some guilt. At the funeral, I saw these 4 little kids, and they were her kids. I didn't know she had children, and no fathers. They're Afro-American, and it's a typical ghetto story that the fathers are absent. So there were no fathers at the funeral. One of the kids had been adopted by, had been taken by a foster family, the baby, Kira, like 3 days before the funeral. And I don't know what came over me, maybe guilt for not having really paid attention to their mom. But whatever the emotion was, I went over to the mother, and who was the kid's grandmother, and said I would, if she would raise the kids for 18 years, I would finance it. I made a deal, because all I knew how to do was make deals. So we made a deal, we shook hands, and the journey began. It's now 24 years, and I'm still in the deal.
It's amazing. And can you tell us about when you first met them? Because I think, to me, I after just knowing you and spending the time that I feel, you might say it's guilt, but I feel it's just this goodness of your heart and wanting to have children, maybe, you know?
Yeah,
like
I don't really question any of my stuff. I just do what I do.
Yeah,
but,
can you tell us that story?
Yeah,
that was so cute.
I didn't meet him at the funeral, and I went and bought a house, and they moved into the house. About a year went by, and I hadn't met him, and I felt a little emotionally scared, actually, to meet him. I just was scary to meet him, to open, you know. And so finally decided I got to go meet him. This is crazy. They sent me a video, you know, all the kids, come on, you know, we want to know you. So anyway, I decided I would take them to Disney World. That would be a nice way to start. So I went up to New York, and I was driving upstate to go meet them, to go to the airport. House about an hour from the city. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, wow, it's an Afro-American family. Great-grandmother lives with them, very religious. I'm sure they like saying a prayer for me every night at dinner, before dinner. I'm sure I've been built up to be this super god to these little guys. I'm white, I'm Jewish, and I just had this vision of them, these like 8 eyeballs looking at me like, when I opened the door, you know, waiting for like 3 hours, being perfect, standing up straight, you know, hello, you know. So I stopped at a store and I bought a Rasta wig.
You bought a wig?
Yeah, you know, the hats with the Rasta hair?
Yes.
And I knocked on the door and I opened it up and there was these 8 little eyes and there I was with my Rasta wig on.
That is so sweet.
And I still have the wig.
Oh my goodness.
I keep it in the house.
I love that.
And we went to Disney World.
And now you have a really great relationship with them.
Yeah,
The
and
kids.
2 of them have had kids, so I just got back from Disney World taking the new kids to Disney World this weekend.
Would
yeah,
you like kids of your own?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
I don't know. I believe in a higher force. I mean, I believe somebody created this, what you call it, I don't know. But it's hard for me to imagine that this many moving pieces could fit together so well if someone didn't think about it. It's just beyond, but I don't feel like I will ever, if I start the journey of trying to figure out what's it all about, that's a journey that'll never end. And then for me, actions. I'm not a big word guy. Words don't mean a lot. I think being in Hollywood. So it's really, you know, it's actions more than the words. So, you know, I think there is a higher force that created it. Whether that higher force is good or evil or confused, or, you know, it's hard to look at the world today and say that somebody really is doing this because they love us.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing for me to relate. So I try not to go there. I just do what I do, and I got very lucky. I enjoy serving, which serves me well.
If you could give advice to anyone who was seeking happiness or peace, inner peace, what advice would you give?
It's a hard place for me to come from giving advice, but I would say be of service to somebody for something, and try not to leave blood. You know, do stuff where it's not winners and losers. Try and think of the world as a place where there can be winners and winners. So when you have a human transaction or a business transaction, you want the other person in that transaction to also be a winner. And if you meditate on that, I think that's success.
Be a winner.
Yeah.
Leave them be a winner.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Instead of winners and losers, we live in a winner-loser.
Yeah.
You know, everything's a poker game.
Yeah.
So
really look out for the betterment of others.
yeah, yeah. Try and just put in the extra effort so that everybody can win.
You're a content man, aren't you? You're more. You're more.
And I'm
from
lucky.
What I
I mean, I've been
more-
blessed. You know,
Yeah.
it's really easy. I have the resources to buy 3 meals a day. I have a shower that works. I have clean drinking water. You know, I have a roof over my head.
But
It's
does
really
that-
easy for me to arrogantly sit here and say I don't have any wishes.
Okay. Well,
But-
that's a good question.
Yeah.
This leads me to my next question, if it's okay. With having things that you've obtained and things, is there a difference between when you maybe didn't have it, or is there still sort of, does that really fulfill
Yeah,
that
I think if you had asked me
security?
that question before I could afford lunch, I probably would have given you a very different answer. I'm not sure what that answer would have been, but yeah, I think I think we, particularly living here in the United States, we forget
the value of a dollar?
the value of not being hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's plenty of people here in America that are hungry too, but I mean, we are I am so blessed, you know, and having resources that I can actually do what I want to do. So, you know, I used to tell my kids when they were growing up, I said, you know, you won the game just where you dropped out of the womb. You drop out in 75% of the world and you have no chance. You're never going to get to 3 meals a day. So just that dropout here in America, you're the luck that you won the game. Now don't blow it.
Service is so important to you. So working in an entertainment industry where it's driven by, you know, a lot of self-service. How has that affected you?
It's challenging at times. Sometimes I would work, you know, you work with a client who doesn't really care about serving anyone except themselves. So that's where the extra hours come in. You figure out a way to make him happy and make everybody else happy, instead of him winning and the other person just losing. So, you know, it's so much of it too is in the preparation of, if you know you have for me as a manager, a client who doesn't really care about anyone except himself, you really make sure that the environment of every step he takes is exactly what he wants. Takes more hours, pre-learning, pre-stuff. You know, there's artists where if they were doing an interview like we're doing today, I would have his couch delivered to the room. So he's sitting on his couch beforehand. It's his makeup person. It's you try and create an environment where they
cater to them.
Where the self-serving also serves the purpose of what they're there for, instead of that artist coming here and storming out because he didn't like the couch.
Did you ever decline to work with anyone because you felt that their values were unattractive?
No, I never was judgmental. I mean, my job, I always felt, was to get an artist, to allow them to have a voice without being not a manipulated voice, but really a voice that wasn't by committee. Yeah, I never felt it was my place to decide. I'm a very liberal Democrat, but Alice is a right-wing Republican. We have completely different views on everything in life, really radically different, but that doesn't affect my profession, and he deserves to have his voice.
Yes.
That's what's important.
Yeah, and Alice, you've managed Alice for 40-some years?
46 years.
That's amazing. Wow. Jeez.
And we haven't agreed on one thing in 46 years.
Is that right?
Yeah, except his career and how you treat people. You know?
Yeah, he's lovely. I got the chance to meet him as well, and his family.
He's all the good stuff about being very religious in an organized way.
And very normal people.
Yeah, just, you know, very compassionate and loving, and sees God in everyone. You know, I think the thing, although His Holiness never said it to me, the thing that I felt I sort of absorbed from being around him was he would see the miracle in everything first. So when he would look at a person or a tree or a building or a car, you could see his face would light up from the miracle of it. And then, once it's a miracle, you can only be compassionate. You can't, you know, and I think that Alice has that sort of quality through his religion, which is a total other end than the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
But I think a religion used properly gets you to feel that God, or whatever you believe in, is in every single thing you're looking at. You are the same thing. So how could you ever treat them anyway but with love and kindness and respect?
There are many paths.
Yeah. And many paths to get you there.
Yeah.
No.
I'm so thankful, Shep, for having you in my life, to call you a friend, and thank you so much for coming to my show today and being a part of Star Spirit. It really means a lot to me.
Thank you for having me, and I'm so proud that you're trying to do good stuff.
Aww,
we need more of that.
Thank you so much for being you.